Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to Teacher Joel's Agricultural Science Corner. Let's learn about agricultural science.
Hey guys, welcome to this session of agricultural science, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the history of agriculture for the grade 7 class, right? So I'm going to dive straight into the presentation, then we're going to watch a little video, a little story that was AI generated, and we're going to then move straight into getting those two things basically, and that should cover the content for today. Along with that, I have worksheets available, and I also have notes that are available. If you need those things, you can type it in the comments, or you can just reach out to me on WhatsApp if you have my number. So I might be doing a Google Class as well, so you can just inbox me for that code. But I hope that you guys enjoy this video, and I hope that you're able to learn something. Hi, so let's head in. So we are going to be talking a little bit about the history of agricultures, and there will be some notes that you can have. You just would have to let me know if you need those notes, and I'll definitely send it over. But we are going to be talking how these hunters became harvesters. Now, when we ask the question, what is agriculture? I want us to think that agriculture is a science. How can agriculture be a science? Well, in agriculture, you need to know how things operate, how the soil operates, how the plants are able to grow. How can we make them grow healthier? How can we make them grow more? All of these things are questions that needs to be answered. And because they need to be answered, we can say that agriculture is a science, because we have to now go and do some scientific research in order to find out the answers to those questions. So agriculture can be defined as a science. Not only can it be defined as a science, it can also be defined as an art. Why? Agriculture produces so many beautiful things. Have you ever looked at a place and you've seen so many beautiful flowers, the grass is kept low, and all of these various things? When you look at it, it's just so beautiful. That's what we're talking about, landscaping. All of these things makes agriculture an art. And agriculture is a business. It's not just about you going into the farm and planting, but it's about growing these plants in a way where they can be healthy. Some persons, they don't like inorganic plants, and because they don't like inorganic plants, they choose to do organic. So you have multiple ways in growing plants, and agriculture is a business of growing plants and raising animals for human use. So the raising animals for human use is so that humans are able to use it. Think about this question. If you were given the opportunity to choose whether to rear or raise a bunch of snakes versus a bunch of chickens, which one would you choose? I'm hoping you said chickens, because there is something that we can do with that chicken, right? What do you think we can do with that chicken? Yes, we can definitely take that chicken and we can use it for cooking. We're able to use it for its eggs. So, we have something to do with that chicken. So definitely, when we grow the plants and we raise these animals, we do them in a way so that we can use them. And it's more profitable. Which one of the two are more profitable as well? So we have to think about, when we're growing these plants and raising these animals, in order to use it, whether it's going to be we're using it in terms of the consumption aspect, where we're eating it, or whether we're using it so that we can do something with our farm or whatever. The main thing is that we're raising them in order to use them. So that's what agriculture is. It's the science, the art, and business of growing plants and raising animals for human use. So, as I would have mentioned, it includes growing crops, of course. And we know in Guyana, we have our rice grown and sugar, right? So it's raising these crops for food, like the rice and vegetables, also raising animals for food, like the cattle and chicken. And something that we would normally find is in Guyana, we eat a lot of various meat. We don't just eat, not everybody eat goat meat, but some persons might. Some person might eat the cow, some persons might eat the pig, some persons might eat the chicken meat. All of these things, persons do them. So because of that, agriculture has something to do with growing those things and raising them. But it's the business of growing these things and raising them, because we're doing it for money. We're doing it so that we're able to make a business out of it at the end of the day. We're able to raise our chickens, sell them, and make an income, right? So that's what we're talking about here. That's what agriculture is. Now, agriculture comes from two Latin words, which is ager, meaning field, and cultura, meaning cultivation. It comes from two Latin words, ager meaning what? And cultura meaning what? I hope you got that. So it's two Latin words, ager and cultura. So this tells us what agriculture is. Let's move on. Now, for thousands of years, persons who were all of our ancestors, the persons who were before us, they used to, in order to eat, they would have had to go out into the various areas, and they'd had to either hunt or gather. So the hunting aspect is where they would have actually taken things like bows and arrows, spears, whatever little tool they can find and make out of bones, wood, and stones, and they would make these things, and then they would have to go and catch the animals. So that's how it's going to be, the hunting aspect. So they were hunter and gatherers. Gatherers has to deal with them going out into the areas and looking for things that they can find, like wild plants, fruits, nuts, whatever they can consume, whatever they're able to eat. So because they were hunter-gatherers, they had to move from one place to find food to another. So let's say that a group of persons were in Linden, and they would have gone all around Linden, and all of the animals they would have already hunted, and all of the trees and the plants, they would have already taken all of those things from it. They would then move from Linden and maybe go on the highway. And if they've used everything out in the highway, then they will move and go to Georgetown. And then when everything is done from Georgetown, they would move and go to Berbice. They're just moving from place to place because they needed to find food. They needed to find something that they can eat. So they would have hunted wild animals, gathered these wild plants, the fruits and the nuts, and then they would continue to go and see where they can find food from. And once all of the animals and all of the fruits and plants and nuts would have completely gone away from an area, or if it's not so much, it's not enough for the family, they would have had to move in order to find food. So that's what we call the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. They hunted and they gathered, right? So that's a very long time, because it's a lot of years. But eventually what happened is that persons discovered that they can grow their own food. Now, We can't say how they discovered. No one actually knows. But I made a little story that's going to show you how they might have discovered their food that you'll see later on in this video. So what the humans back then discovered is that they're able to now plant seeds, and if they wait for a few, they will be able to actually have plants from them, and these plants would produce fruits or vegetables or nuts. And because they actually saw that they can wait, they started to plant and they started to farm. And then after a while, they began to grow, and then they were able to eat those fruits and the plants and the nuts and everything that they were growing. They were able to actually eat them. Also, because of all of the excess things that they had, let's say they discarded them, they would have noticed that these animals would have came and eaten it, and animals would be around them more. The animals wouldn't really run from them, so they didn't have to go and hunt. So they learned that it would be better for them to actually tame the animals. So they domesticated or tame the animals by feeding them, ensuring that they started to not hunt them or run behind them and chase them away. They started to capture them in some cases, put them in pens, and then they started to domesticate them. And because of that, these animals were able to provide food and even help with work, because they would have tamed oxen back then, they were able to then use the oxen and make some tools, and then that oxen would be able to drag those tools across the field and plow that field for them, instead of the humans themselves going and plow up that field. So they were able to not only domesticate the animals and have food, but the animals would have also helped with work. Now, because this happened, the persons were able to actually stay in one place. So when it happened that they noticed that I don't have to go to, I'm in Linden, I don't have to go to the highway, or I don't have to go to Georgetown just so that I can go and find anything anymore. I have everything here. I have food here. I have clothing here. I have my family here. I am able to have access to water. If you have everything in the area, would you still want to move and go somewhere else? Maybe for some persons, but those persons who were able to do these things, provide their own food, they actually decided that they're going to settle down in one place. Now, as I mentioned before, these early farmers, they didn't have all of the big machines and all of the tools that we had. They would have used simple tools, right? And as you can see here, the early farmer that we have, he would have made something out of a wood, also out of stones. So they would have tried their best to make use of the things that they had. So early farmers, they didn't have these big machines, and then they started to use whatever they had. For example, they would use the sticks for digging holes, sharp stones for cutting, and bones for various tasks, because they would have used the bones in order to hunt. They would have used the bones in order to maybe cut something and to make stuff with it as well. So farming back then, it was a lot of time, and it took a lot of physical labor as well. So because of that, it was really good for when they were able to domesticate these animals, and they were able to actually have them work with them, and when they started to make the tools a little bit better. Now here you're able to see some pictures of before versus after, and here these are the machines that we have after as well. If you notice, with all of these tools that they have, whether it's the spear, the little knife, or the arrow and bow, or the little axe, all of them were made either of strings, wood, bones, stones. They weren't made with anything extra because they weren't able to do anything. Then after a while, they started to see that the iron is stronger, so they would have started to make that iron into other tools. So some tools that we have here, like things like, as we know, the water can, the shovel, the spade, the fork, the rake, all of these things, they would have transitioned from here and they would have gone into where we're at now. So I want you to notice that before, they didn't have as much tools as we have now, and now we even have more machines, and agriculture is actually progressing in such a way whereby we can even integrate technology, right? Because in the past, the Amerindians used to use a method which is called shifting cultivation. So they would have a clear patch of land. Here, they would farm for a few seasons and then they would move. Once they move, the farm that they had, it would be able to then recover. The soil would be able to recover. So these plants need various nutrients. The three main nutrients, NPK, where the N represents nitrogen, the P represents phosphorus, and the K represents potassium. So N represents nitrogen, P represents phosphorus, and the K represents potassium. So those three nutrients were needed, and they might have not known that at that point in time, but they would have noticed that if they continued planting on this land over and over and over, they would have less and less crops. So then they would have moved, give this area some time, and then they would have come back to it at a later time. And then they notice when they come back later that this land would have been able to be fertile again. So this is something that they would have done in order to help that soil to recover. But today, farmers in places like Region 6, they use advanced technologies, where rice farmers actually uses a machine to plant. So we don't have the physical human labor happening. They just go in the machine, and that machine is able to work big fields. They're able to they don't have to go and wait on this piece of land anymore. They have fertilizers, and they're able to harvest large fields. And right now, there are so many emerging technologies in agriculture. So because of that, we were able to do so much more. Now, when we look at the area that we're in right now from before, I want you to understand that today's farming tools, it has not only just going into the farm and just being in the sun all day, just clearing away lands or so forth. It has a mix of science and technology. Because what they would note is that, okay, we want our crops to grow healthy, so they would use things like fertilizers, like limestones and all these things to reduce the acidity. They use all of these things so that they're able to make the soil healthier and help these crops to grow faster. They also use tools and even these big machines so that the work is not that long. It don't take that long. Right? So farmers would use cutlasses and hoes for smaller jobs, maybe garden forks, but the tractors, once the area is so big, they would need to utilize that as well. And they would have learned various systems, like the irrigation system, for example, that will bring the water to the crops even when it doesn't rain. Because in areas that would like to do rice, they need to have that water. So once they irrigate that area, they're able to actually get those crops. So that's how today's farming involves science and technology as well. Now we're going to do this in the other video, but I want you guys to just think about why agriculture is important. Because we saw the change where the early humans would have had to go with spears and iron bow and all these makeshift various tools in order to actually hunt and gathered. And because they were able to move from there and understand that they can farm and they can domesticate animals, they were able to have stable food. They were able to know that this is something that it will take a while, of course, but within the next 3 weeks, maybe I will get some lettuce. Maybe in the next year, I will get some mangoes and all of these various things. So they were able to have some patience and wait. So as you can see here, the early man would have just hunted and gathered, and then eventually they were able to actually have some assistance once they domesticated animals, and they would have made a better change to the work that they're doing with those animals, or with the tools that they're using. And then now we're able to even improve that a lot more, so we can have more crops, right? So they had this stable home, and because they had stable food, and because they had stable food, they're now able to have permanent homes, because they are doing these things, they will now have to build these permanent villages and cities. So because of that, once the buildings were there, we would have to have jobs. Persons would have to make tools for these farmers, and then the farmers would be able to sell the food that they have, because they have new tools that is going to make that crop grow faster and make the work easier. So agriculture not only provides us with food, but it also provides us with clothes to wear. It provides us with money that we can spend. It provides us with opportunities, whether it's going to be for education, or it's going to be in various sectors. But we have those opportunities and those things that are available. So here are a few questions, basically just to see what you would have learned from today. So take a minute and let's go. You can pause the video whenever you're ready, and then we're going to go through the questions. You can pause the video right after, think about the answer it, and then you can just come back to the video to see if you would have gotten those questions correct. So what is the definition of agriculture? I hope you would have said that it's the science, the art. It's also managing or growing crops and rearing animals for human use. What two Latin words does the term come from? Okay, I hope you would have said ager, meaning field, and cultura, meaning cultivation. Next question. What did people do for food before they learned how to farm? Okay, they would have hunted and they would have gathered. So they would have hunted wild animals, and they would have gathered wild plants, fruits, and nuts. Hope you got that. And what is that name of that lifestyle? Okay, that lifestyle is called hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Next question. Can you describe the biggest change that happened during the agricultural revolution? Okay, the biggest change that happened during the agricultural revolution was that humans were able to grow their own food, and they were also able to domesticate animals and raise them. I hope you would have gotten those answers correctly. Let's move on. How were the tools of early farmers different from the tools that these modern farmers use today? Okay, they're different because the early farmers would have used tools that were made from bones, sticks, and rocks or stones only, while modern farmers are able to use big machines, and they're also able to use various tools for simple work like that has metal inside. So I hope you got those things. So there's so many examples. So just shoot some examples out there of the early tools versus the modern tools. I know that you know there's so many, so you can choose any one of those. I know that you're going to get that right. Good. Let's move on to the next question. What is the difference between a hunter-gatherer lifestyle and a settled agricultural lifestyle? Please remember to just pause the video at any time if you want to answer those questions on your own, and then you can come back to the video. So the difference between a hunter-gatherer lifestyle and a settled agricultural lifestyle is that the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, they would move from place to place in order to find these animals, wild plants, fruits, and nuts. While the settled agricultural lifestyle is where they grow their own crops, and they're able to stay in one area, and they're able to build homes and have jobs and all of these various things. Next question. How has farming in Guyana changed over time? Okay, it would have changed by them moving from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, whereby moving from one place to another, looking for these wild animals and looking for these things. And then now they have modern technology, they have science, they have all these various tools and so forth, right? Also, they would have practiced shifting cultivation, while now they don't have to do that. They just use fertilizers and so forth in order to give back that soil the NPK that it needs. What is shifting cultivation, and what are farmers doing instead today? Well, I would have answered that question just now. So I hope that you know what shifting cultivation is. It's where they have the clear piece of land and they would have moved away for a time and then come back to it later in order to plant on it again, because they wanted to have healthy crops and they wanted those crops to grow. And farmers instead are basically just using science to get the crops running, get the soil ready, get the crops healthy, get the crops within the time that they need it, and so forth. All right, great. As we continue, why do you think the invention of agriculture was so important for human civilization? These are some things that I want you to think about and I want you to answer, and you can just write that down in your notebook. Next one. What changed because people could stay in one place? Besides providing food, next question, besides providing food, what other things does agriculture give us? Final question. If you had to pick one tool that was important for the history of agriculture, which tool would that be? And why? Great. Now you're just going to shout out if this is a new tool or an old tool as I go through. Is this an old tool or a new tool? New. Good. Is this an old tool or a new tool? New. Good. Is this an old tool or a new tool? Old. Good. Is this old tool or new tools? New. Good. Is this an old tool or a new tool? Old. Good. Is this an old tool or a new tool? Old. Good. What about these? Are these old tools or new tools? New. Good. What about these? Are these old tools or new tools? New. Great. So this has brought us to an end of this video. Tell me how much you got right here in the comments, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or you feel like you missed something, please feel free to go back to the video and have a really good one. Thank you.
Oh, hi there. My name is Joe. Me and my friends will tell you a story of the history of agriculture. Here we have Keel. Keel's world was a giant scavenger hunt. He was a hunter-gatherer from long ago, and every single day was a new mission to find food. He tracked deer through the woods and searched for juicy berries on the bushes. His family never stayed in one place for too long. They were always on the move, following the animals and the seasons. Life was tough, and sometimes Keel's stomach would grumble with hunger. When they couldn't find enough food, of course, he respected the forest, but he was also always a little worried that the food would run out. One day, while digging for tasty roots, he saw something amazing. A plant he had eaten last year had grown right where he tossed its seed. It was a tiny moment, but it gave him a huge idea. What if they didn't have to chase their food? What if they could just grow it? Kiel's tribe was a little nervous about the idea. Moving from place to place was what they had always done. But they were hungry, so they decided to give it a try. Kiel and his family found a nice flat spot near a stream and got to work. Using simple digging sticks, just sharpened branches, they slowly broke up the hard ground. It took a long time and was super hard work. Then they planted the seed they had saved. They also noticed some wild goats that were brave enough to come near. Kiel realized that if he gave them food, they would stick around. Pretty soon, his family had their own little farm and a small herd of animals. And for the very first time, they had a home they didn't had to leave. Just like Kiel and his family, early man was described as hunter-gatherers. Wild animals, fish, fruits and nuts were his main type of food. As these sources of food began to get scarce with the increasing population, they had to try different things. And by trying different things, by looking at what is happening in their surrounding and also experience, early man developed a system of planting crops and rearing animals in order to satisfy the growing needs of them and their family. The earliest settlers, the Amerindian, hunted, fished and planted simple crops. And after 1621, the European settlers altered the pattern of agriculture in Guyana. And from then, so many things would have happened. I hope you enjoyed this little story, and please feel free to watch it back anytime you're ready.